Welcome. I'm Stephen Winnick of the American Folklife Center of the Library of Congress. For many years, we have presented the Homegrown Concert Series featuring the best in folk music and dance from around the world at the Library of Congress in Washington. On September 14th, 2023, we are presenting Nani Noam Vasana, a singer and musician who performs in Ladino or Judeo-Spanish, the language associated with Sephardic Jews. Nani is also unusual in being one of the very few artists in the world to be writing new songs in Ladino, which is mostly associated with late medieval ballads and traditional folk songs. When we can, we like to do interviews with our homegrown artists, so I am here with Nani Noam Vasana so she can tell us about her tradition and her music. Welcome, and thank you for the interview.
Thank you for having me, Steve. It's nice to be here.
So, could you begin by saying your own name for us so that people will hear it pronounced more correctly than I
You
just
did
did?
it perfectly, actually.
Oh,
Nani Noam
excellent.
Bazana. That's perfect.
Excellent. So I'm going to ask you some questions about your background first. So where are you from originally?
I was born in Israel, in the north of Israel, in Haifa, but my family comes from Morocco. The
Hmm.
Yeah, actually, they have several roots. Some of them come from Casablanca, some of them come from Fez, some of them come from Tangier. Yeah.
Great. So, and we'll talk about the your ancestral home in a little bit, but in Israel, did you grow up with family members who sing and play music?
No, I'm actually the only person in my family that plays music, funnily enough. So I didn't have that inspiration, but I really wanted to play music. My parents
Hmm.
actually tell me that when I was a baby, when I heard like classical music, I would like stop crying and start listening. So then I guess they played me a lot of good music when I was a child or a baby even. So that was a good influence.
That always helps, yeah. And what about sort of music education in Israel? Is music taught in school and do you get good exposure there?
Not really in regular school, but I went to music school when I was 5 years
Hmm.
old. I asked to learn the piano, and I was lucky enough that my parents were convinced. It took some time to convince them, but yeah. So I just went to like a private or actually municipal music school, which is
Hmm.
not the same as the regular school. It's an after-school activity.
Hmm. And what styles of music were you learning there?
Classical music, like
Hmm.
Bach and Mozart,
So were you
Salieri.
initially a piano player or?
Yeah, originally the first instrument I've studied is piano, but I also
Mm.
play trombone.
Yeah, and that's kind of an interesting facet of your music. And one of the things that we noticed when seeing you perform live was how beautiful your trombone actually is. So we wonder if you would show us your instrument and talk a little bit about it.
Sure, I have it right here.
All right,
Mm.
cool.
So I'll pick it up. I mean, it's such a beautiful shape, isn't it? And
Yeah,
it has many facets. Like on
very
my
cool.
first album that I released, you can see me really like holding the trombone in front of the
Yeah.
camera, and then like it looks like a sun because the spotlight was directed to the trombone, and it just looks so beautiful. And we took that photo and we used it for the album cover. Um, but also the tone. I mean, I guess I started playing trombone because I wanted to sing lower, and then like playing piano, I was accompanying myself while singing. But my voice is it has a big range, but I mean it sounds high, and then I don't have the range of a tenor, and this is the way that I can expand that range
That's
and
great.
go into the deep.
Yeah. So, so initially, were you also singing classical music, singing, sort of mainstream classical songs?
Um, well, not originally. I only started studying classical music, classical singing, let's say, the age of 21. So
Oh,
before
okay.
that, I was more focused on just transcribing songs that I've heard on the radio, writing my own songs. Um, Funnily enough, in English.
Yeah.
I wrote in Hebrew as well, but I haven't written in Ladino until I was like 27, 28. This connection came kind of late in my life.
So, one thing that might be interesting to people is some background on the relationship between Ladino and Sephardic Judaism in general and Israel. How is that facet of Jewish culture represented in the national culture?
Um, I wouldn't say it's mainstream at all. I mean, it's kind of a secret language.
Yeah.
My dad was kind of anticlimactic to everything that happened in Morocco because his family, they kind of came as refugees to Israel. I mean, not that they were hurt specifically, but there was a terrorist attack at the same school that where my father's brothers were studying, and then they were not hurt, but other kids got hurt, and then they thought like, oh, this is the time to leave. And in the 50s, they just came to Israel, I guess, to escape persecution, and he felt like he wanted to leave everything behind. So then he closed off, and we were not allowed to speak Ladino at home. We're not allowed to speak Arabic at home. So, I mean, I only spoke Ladino with my grandmother, kind of in secret, like when we were alone, and we would cook, and then she would say, "Hey, this is how you say pot, and this is how you say pan in Ladino, and this is how you say, beans or something like that, you know." And she
Right.
would sing a song or tell me a story that I've never heard before because these stories were unknown at school. We never heard these stories. Other kids, when I told these stories to other kids, they were like, "Where did you hear that story?" But apparently later on, when I did some research to write my own songs in Ladino, I found out these were like traditional Sephardic
Hmm.
fairy tales. So I grew up in a world that I didn't really knew, like a part of it was not very familiar to me, but at the same time, it was interesting and secretive and magical. So I wanted to find out more about it.
Great. And you've told a story before about your grandmother and your going to Morocco to perform in a jazz festival and just suddenly being struck by a connection to your grandmother. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I my grandmother passed away when I was 12, and I kind of lost contact with that culture, with Sephardic culture. And I was studying classical music. I was writing my own songs, and then I started establishing myself as a singer-songwriter, and I could say maybe indie jazz songwriter. And then I was already having quite a successful career, like traveling the world with my songs. And then at one point, I was invited to play at a jazz festival in Morocco, in Tangier. But that was the first time I visited Morocco. I never went there before, which is also funny. You know, like you're 23, 24, and you never visited your grandparents' home country, hometown. So then I thought like, oh, that's an opportunity to do that and to look for a little bit of roots, see the house where you grew up, etc. So I went to Fez, and on the third day, when I was walking down the street, I heard people singing a familiar melody. It was some kind of a street party. I don't even know what kind of holiday it was. I tried to find out from people who were like walking around, but none of them spoke English, so it was difficult to find out. But there was like a procession and people singing, and more people joined, and then it came clear to me that I've heard that melody at my grandmother's house. She used to sing this when I was a child. And this is how I got reconnected with Ladino, because it kind of found me. I didn't
Hmm.
look for it, but it found me back. And when I came back home, I started researching some more songs, trying to find out more about my heritage. And luckily enough, I was drawn to the materials. So I just started jamming with friends, you know,
Hmm.
just trying to find out what I feel about it. It was not a plan to release a record or anything. We just did a little jam at home. We put 2 songs on YouTube, and it blew up. It was like 500,000 views right away.
Wow.
Um, and it felt right. It's I, but then we played like these covers, these standards,
Hmm.
like old time favorite Sephardic songs for about 2 years on tour. And then it became apparent to me that I can't continue to do that without writing my own songs. And then I thought I'm not able to do that because I didn't believe in myself that I could learn the language well enough and do that. And then again, I was lucky. The Amsterdam Roots Festival approached me and they asked if I could suggest a program revolving around Ladino. And then I came up with that idea that, well, I want to write. So if they're offering me a year residency, why don't I just go study Ladino with a scholar and then learn how to write in Ladino. And that's what I did. I did it for 2 years, took some lessons in Leiden. It's another city in the Netherlands. And I got reconnected to the language. And now I write songs in Ladino.
All right. So in that first phase when you were getting into Ladino and Ladino songs, where do you go if you want to become a Ladino singer? What's your pathway?
For me, it was very associative. I mean, I wasn't thinking like I want to become a Ladino singer, or I did know at a certain point I wanted to write my own songs. And then when I did that, I went to study with a scholar, like to learn the language better. I visited Etz Chaim Library, which is like the oldest Jewish library in the Netherlands, to look for texts, so ancient texts, because not a lot of like modern people write in Ladino, so it's not like you can go and buy a poetry book. So I had to go back to the original manuscripts, like really religious texts, to get some references. It was very hard to find secular texts. There was the professor I've studied with helped me find some secular texts, and then I started composing existing texts, and then I based new songs, new texts that I wrote on like the same template, you could say, of the old text. So I would just take an old sentence. It's not really a language that has like a distinct grammatical structure, right? So I would just take a sentence from an old poem or from an old play, and then I would say, I want to say something else, but can I fit these words into that template? And then I would show it to the professor, and he was like, oh, that's correct, or that's incorrect. You need to change this and that. And I've sent him back and forth my texts for reviews, and he did some corrections, and eventually it was ready to be composed. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I mean I think that's a common way for folks who are starting out in a musical tradition to compose new songs, is to take the old texts and kind of rework them, or write new words that fit in that same template. But it's great that you have a mentor, a professor who can look at these texts and tell you whether, you pretty much have it, because of course Ladino is quite an unusual language. There aren't that many people around who are studying it. So what's your professor's name, if you don't mind telling us?
Jonathan Benavides.
Well, thank you for helping Nani with these great songs, because it's a great gift to the world to have new songs in Ladino. And one of the things that I was driving at there, and I'm glad that you talked about it, was the importance of archives and libraries, because that's what we do here at the Library of Congress. So we're always glad to find out how people use library resources in their performance life. So,
I was super excited when you invited me, by the way.
Well, we're super excited to have you. Absolutely.
I'm basically a nerd in disguise.
Yeah, I think all of us at the Library of Congress are nerds, and I don't disguise it as well as you do. So,
I'm not trying to disguise it, but like people see you as a musician, they think, oh, you're cool. But when we strike up a conversation, you're like, oh, you're kind of intellectual. What's that about?
Right. So you moved to Amsterdam to pursue your career. So talk about the scene in Amsterdam and how it supports such a wide variety of music, including yours.
The scene in Amsterdam is very much changing, especially in the last 4 years, because the priorities have shifted government-wise. There are different funds and different festivals that support different kinds of art, and in the last 4 years you see a big shift towards pop and urban music. Before that, I felt that there was more room for experimental and I wouldn't call it folk, because they don't really encourage folk. They encourage crossover, or they used to encourage crossover, jazz in particular, experimental jazz, and some global roots. I wouldn't even call it global roots, because it's really like a crossover, a fusion of pop and global roots. And then at the moment, it feels like there is a big shift towards pop music and rock music and urban music that is more, I don't know if that's a fashion thing, or that's because that's how they feel they will actually get connected to the younger generations. But I feel that our type of music is getting overlooked a little bit at this day and age. In 2018, there were still grants available for our type of music on a larger scale, and now it's a little bit less inclusive. And I hope to see more projects like that rise up and claim their turf, really, because there's so much beautiful diversity in the Netherlands in terms of cultural backgrounds. I don't know if you've heard that recently the Dutch government offered their apologies for reparations for slavery. And
Yes, yeah.
this was a big event for the first time. Keti Koti, which means cutting the chains.
Yeah.
It was always been an event for me because I always went to these events, but they were always small. And this year was the first time that it was a big event and also received national recognition. So I hope that we will follow in the path of admiring and recognizing these cultural groups and try to support them as much as we can.
Yeah, and that will entail political action, but also cultural, musical action as well. And so, yeah, so we certainly hope that that musical diversity continues to be supported in the Netherlands and throughout the world. I'm sorry to hear that it seems to be getting tougher for artists who do the kind of music that you do, but I also know that you're involved in sort of cultural activism in general, but music activities that support music as well as the music itself. So I guess we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I do want to talk about your musical career a little bit more. I mean, I know you mentioned that you started to get involved in both traditional Sephardic songs and then later in writing your own Ladino songs. And I wonder how you came to have then a recording career. So I know, tell us a little bit about the genesis of your first Ladino recording project.
It happened right here in this living room. Maybe that's why I chose to broadcast from here. It was really nothing that I've expected. I thought we were going to record a demo. We recorded it live. I was with guitar, singing, and an instrument from the 80s that is called iwi. It's like an electric saxophone kind of thing.
Okay.
And we just jammed. And then we thought, like, okay, we'll record a bunch of things. Then we can listen back, and then we will rearrange them and make an actual production. And after listening to the tracks, we thought it could stand alone on its own. But then it wasn't in a quality that you could mix it to be a fantastic recording, because everything was recorded at the same time, and we couldn't separate the channels because there was bleed. So we actually put it out as is for free online. We got a lot of downloads, and then at a certain point people said, like, why don't you do like a crowdfunding project and just produce a better recording? And we did that with the new record, Que Haber, which means what is new in Ladino. If you don't mind, I have the vinyl here. I'm very, very proud of it.
Oh, please show us. Yeah.
The artwork is amazing.
Oh, there it is. Beautiful. Wow. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's like the most amazing artwork I've ever had. It's made by Asaf Lugowitz. And it's like really capturing what I'm trying to do, like looking into the past to see the future. And this is why you can see also this emergent character from the darkness, but then into something that is very lit, that looks like a sunset at the same time. So you're like, something is coming out of this world, but something is coming into this world at the same time. So this was kind of the atmosphere that I want to create with the record. The first one, the one we discussed previously that was recorded in this living room, was called Andalusian Brew. And that was just the standards, the 12, most known songs of Sephardic tradition. So from Morenica to Adieu Querida, every single one of them is a hit.
Hmm.
and and in the new record, it's all unknown songs that I've written myself. And one of the most beautiful compliments that I received ever about this record was actually in a review in a magazine in the Czech Republic, and they said Nani managed to write an album of new songs that sound familiar, although she wrote it herself. So like, I hope that it does justice to the tradition somehow, or at least lets people think about what is old and how you can recreate that, and connect to people in my generation. I guess it's also kind of my inspiration. It's not only about inspiring myself, but also trying to inspire others to follow their own story. Because
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah, it's not only about yourself. You're a part of the community now. Once you've released these songs, they're a part of the world. They're not yours
Yeah.
anymore.
Could you say a little about that, about the sort of global Sephardic community and how they've accepted or commented on your work?
It depends who you ask. Some people find it amazing and exciting that new music is being written in Ladino, and they're really appreciative of what I do. And you can see them in the shows. They come and they come to talk to me afterwards. And some of them have like a tear in their eyes, and it's fantastic to see. And the fact that we can strike up a conversation about something so old and make it so relevant is amazing to me. And then there is also a minority of people that would say that it's not the way to do it, that it's not tradition. Some of them say that I don't pronounce the words in a correct way, which is actually a choice. I decided to go with more Spanish, Castilian accent rather than the older accent, because I want to make music accessible for everyone. And it's more important to me that it will reach as many young people than that it will be like the exact replica of what we used to do in the past. I also don't sing in the same way that other Ladino singers sing. That's also maybe something that has to be mentioned, that most Ladino repertoire recordings, they focus on the embellishments of the voice and not so much on the beautiful melody. And I guess maybe that's also because I've studied opera singing,
Yeah.
that I really like focusing on the bel canto, like the beautiful singing, the real melody, and not so much about the ego of the singer that wants to be heard or show off. And in a way, I'm not interested in showing off. I'm interested in, I don't know, be emotional. Is that something? For me, it's more genuine that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, there are different approaches and you have to pick one and go with it. But one thing that I noticed that you said was that you go with a more Castilian kind of Spanish approach to Judeo-Spanish. And of course, it's a language that's spoken in so many countries by people who are bilingual in so many different languages that there are so many different ways of speaking it across the world.
Exactly.
And is that one of the reasons why you chose this Spanish path, the Castilian path?
I really don't think that we know what it sounded like.
Right.
And for me, it has to be accessible and beautiful at the same time. I don't know if you know, like that in the 14th century, when they were there was this council that came together to choose the most beautiful strand of Italian. And they were like, yeah, we're gonna go with Dante's work because that's the most beautiful Italian we know. And after that, everything was written with that dialect. I mean,
right.
For me, the Spanish Castilian accent, it's the most beautiful accent that exists in that language. Maybe I don't know them all. That's also possible. I'm not saying that I know everything, but when I chose to sing this music, I felt like I want to make it as beautiful as I can, and then I chose this accent because I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
And is it right? Is it wrong? I don't know. Why do people still shoot in black and white when they make film? It's a choice. It's because it's cool,
Yeah.
You also have to do something that means something to you or feels right to you, because otherwise it's not art. It's
Sure.
it's becoming less subjective, and you want to be subjective
Yeah.
when you make art.
Yeah, I think also there might be a danger that if you chose to try to do it in a specifically Moroccan way, let's say,
Yeah,
that Serbian Sephardic Jews might see that as foreign in some way or
yeah,
as different from what they do. So there's also that the community itself is not monolithic, and there's just different varieties out there. So by
absolutely.
coming at it as a kind of an outsider with a family connection, it kind of you're kind of in the middle of all of these traditions in a certain way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always an outsider. I think it doesn't matter what I do. So
Yeah.
yeah, and
So
also
one
the
thing,
topics
yeah,
that I speak about are like not exactly mainstream. They
right.
are they're poignant. They raise questions. Like the professor that I mentioned before that I took lessons with, he showed me some texts, like ancient texts from the 13th century and the 11th century, that portray homoerotic poetry that were
Hmm.
written by rabbis. I mean, it's like, and then I went and composed the song out of a combination of these texts. And when I published it, people were like, "Hey, are you outing our rabbi? Like, what is going on here?" And they didn't like it. Even that same professor, he renounced the connection between us. He said, "I've never showed her these texts. These texts
Oh,
don't exist. Of course they exist." So, like, what? But what is the point? I mean, like, how closed off are we if we cannot discuss openly things like that? And were they more advanced than us in the 13th century if they already
yeah,
had this in the open? So I don't know. We say that we're advanced, but sometimes I'm not so sure.
yeah. Well, that opens the question of if you want to talk about more contemporary issues, and um, your initial way of writing songs was to go to old texts and kind of update the language within them, but keep the same structures. Did you find you had to go beyond that in order to speak about more modern subjects?
Um, I'm not sure. I mean, I guess I always write from a modern point of view because I live in
Hmm.
this world.
Yeah,
And even if I would write a timepiece, I would always write it with my own perspective because otherwise I'd be copy pasting stuff.
yeah,
And like if I read a novel and it's a timepiece, I would always want to have the author's point of view because they cannot write from the point of view of a person that was living 500 years ago because they haven't
right.
had the experience. So yeah, I guess. And also maybe because I spoke Ladino with my grandmother when I was 4 years old. So until 12, sort of. Um, so I have the perspective of a child. So when
Yeah,
I write in Ladino, I am in awe with certain things that I'm probably not in the same awe about when I write in English or when I write in Hebrew, because I'm way too sarcastic to, when I look at them like this, So that's another beautiful thing that's why I also love writing in Ladino, because it flows so easily, because I can just wonder and it comes out.
yeah. Great.
It
Well, so
has
we've
its
talked.
limitations. I don't know the language as well, but that's also liberating at the same time.
Yeah. Well, it helps you keep a childlike perspective for one
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, so that's great. So, uh, we've talked a lot about the songwriting and the language.
Yeah.
We haven't talked as much about the music yet, and how you arrange these songs. So, what's your approach to arrangement for your new Ladino songs?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. I um, I think that every song is different. Like every song poses a different perspective, and hence also a different mood. And then for me, I see musical style as a tool to manifest emotion. So I don't really think, oh, I need to arrange it in this style because this is the style of the record. So if you look at the new record, you see that it has like three different, let's say, subdivision. So like it starts with 3 songs that are more kind of traditional Turkish, Spanish music, and then we go to a whole middle part that is dominated by Caribbean and classical trombone music. And then it ends with something that is more crossover with jazz. And then actually the album closes on a note on a thank you note. So it's not really, it's more of a journey. It's not like the whole record is arranged in a certain way. Like for instance, I just released a single this week. It's called Lambarico, and it has only 4 tracks of trombone and vocals. It has nothing else. So there are no other instruments. And that's like a foreign point on the album almost, but because it's segmented in a way that the subdivision of the record falls into the trombone part, it feels very natural within the soundscape when you reach that part of the record. So in a way, shuffle had destroyed the music industry. So I would recommend that if you listen to the record, that you would listen to it like, in flow, and flip the side, when you have to. But there is a reason why you make a record and don't only release singles. I mean, I released it as a single, but as a single out of the record. And there was also an order to the release of the single. So they are ordered in a certain way. And then some of the other songs, like for instance, we have one song with charango, which is a Chilean string instrument, a little bit like a mandolin, but made from the skin of an armadillo. We actually have a Chilean guitarist who also plays the charango on the record. And we have, of course, piano and trombone. There is a cello. Somebody asked me if it was electric guitar, because on one of the tracks we did put some distortion on the cello. What else? Yeah, I guess that's it. It's a pretty basic like rhythm section album. Not a lot of strings, not a lot of huge productions, no electronics. Percussion, a lot of percussion from different places. Bombo leggero, so a lot of Latin American instruments. But also darbuka, so like we connect the East and the West at the same time. It's eclectic, I would say. But I think in a good way. It's interesting.
Sounds great.
You won't get bored.
Yeah. So are there, either on your local scene or globally, any specific groups of musicians that have influenced your approach in music and in arranging your own songs?
This is something that is perhaps funny to hear, but when I was 21 years old, I made a decision not to listen to music anymore because I felt it influenced my writing as a composer.
Yeah.
So I do listen sometimes. Like for instance, if there's an artist that I like that released a new album, then I would go and listen to it once, and I won't repeat it. I listen to new records of when friends release a record, and I go to live shows, but I don't play like I used to play on repeat records all the time. But because it influenced me, I decided not to do it. So then I couldn't say that there is one person specifically that inspired me to arrange the record in that way. Pretty much went with my association and what the song demanded.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach, and the not listening to music decision is very interesting. I think, as you say, it's something people don't expect to hear, but it makes there's a logic to it that's interesting to think about. So, so now since you started doing Ladino songs, you've had a touring career as well, which was to some extent interrupted by the global pandemic.
Absolutely.
But do you have any highlights of your touring career that you'd like to tell us about?
Well, the Kennedy Center was amazing. I'm so happy that we were able to perform there, and also very lucky that we received a fantastic recording of the concert. So it's actually on my YouTube channel. It's accessible for free for everyone. And it's really, I think, a good representation of what we do in order to try and preserve the language. And I also tell a lot of stories in that
Hmm.
concert, try to explain why are we doing this and how did we do that. So each and every, I think almost each and every song gets a story or a little bit of an explanation of what kind of path are we embarking on. And I love that. I'm happy that I had the opportunity to play there. I would say that the tour we did in Vietnam in 2019, before the pandemic started, was also a very defining moment in my career, because for the first time, I met an amazing culture that was so foreign to me that I've never met that before, but it influenced my psyche in such a beautiful way.
Hmm.
They're so warm, so beautiful people, so wise, so fast and slow at the same time. And the fact that I didn't even know I had fans there, that's that's fantastic to go and you do three concerts, and three of these concerts are sold out. And
Wow.
then people are saying, I have this little clip because I was invited there to represent the Netherlands at the European Union Music Festival, which is a little bit like the Eurovision, but not the popular songs.
Right.
It's like the more traditional songs. So then I went there to do that, and then I found out that they used one of my songs in a local campaign to support transgender youth. I did
Mm.
not know that. Like your songs are getting used somewhere and you don't know, you're not always aware because they not necessarily approach you. They just do it
Yeah.
through the publishing company.
Yeah.
And it's not like you get a contract sent out. And then like all these people singing that. I have a song called Hey You that was used for that campaign, and then people lit the torches on their phone, and
Right.
600 people were like doing this with their phones, and I was like, what is going on? How do they know that song? And then later on I was told that this was a story, and I was like, wow, what an amazing moment to witness without even knowing that your song touched so many people. And that's why I also say it's not so much about me, it's not so much about us as the songwriters, because I believe that the ideas come to us because they want to be created.
Yeah.
And then we are the ones who help them get, I don't know, a body in this world. We need to collaborate with the ideas because otherwise none of us have a goal in this life. But once the ideas are born, they're not us, they're not ours. So this whole ego thing, about saying this is my song, or you cannot do this with my song, you cannot cover, you cannot do this, I don't really relate to it, because the song is its own entity, and once it's out, it's out. It's like a
Hmm.
child, you can't control it,
Right.
after it's out there.
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
So, so normally we do these interviews either right after the concert or at least after the concert's been recorded if it's one of our
Mm,
video premieres. But in this case, we are speaking in advance of the concert. So,
mm.
with the understanding that things might change, could you tell us some of your plans for your concert at the Library of Congress?
Well, I'm playing with my trio, which are beautiful people, and we're gonna bring a lot of interesting percussion instruments. We have like a whole list. Thea knows because we've discussed the backline back and
Yeah.
forth. Um, and we're gonna do a lot of explaining because I think the audience there will be very receptive to storytelling. I'm a big fan of storytelling, so I want to tell stories with each and every song. And I think we will do mainly original work, but maybe also two traditional songs or perhaps a cover to enhance the experience for the audience. That I think it's always good to connect with something that is familiar, because then you go straight to the heart.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Well, we're so looking forward to it. And
Yeah.
you mentioned that when you played at the Kennedy Center, you ended up with a nice concert video,
Mm.
which is online, and that's going to be the
Yeah.
case at the Library of Congress as well. Your
Yes.
concert will be on our YouTube channel, on our webpage, and on our blog. So we're looking forward to presenting your music both in person at the Library of Congress and online for the world to see. So we're really looking forward to that. So often when I end these interviews, I ask the artist if they have anything else that they wanted to say that I didn't get to. I know you have other projects and other goals in life besides just making music, and I wonder if you wanted to talk about any of that. So
other goals in life, I don't know. This is pretty much my goal. Yeah, I mean, I love communication. So for me, music is a way to make the world better. Also in a communication kind of way, because when you sing, when you play music, it's transcending a lot of limitations. You don't necessarily need to understand the language. I sing in a language that hardly nobody speaks.
Right.
And then like people literally ask me, I did an interview 2 weeks ago on Dutch radio, and the presenter literally asked me, why don't you sing in English? Isn't that more accessible? And I was like, yeah, but no, because I'm doing this and this is special, and this is why this is more accessible. Imagine that I would just do another record like Lady Gaga. Would that be special? It wouldn't be special. I want to do who I am, and then, like I said before, inspire people to find their own stories. And perhaps if people want to stay in touch, I would love to invite them to sign up for the newsletter, because a lot of people follow me on social media, and because of algorithms, you don't get to see my messages. So if you want to stay in touch, please go to nanimusic.com/news and sign up for the newsletter. Thank you so much for having me and for watching.
Thank you. And I will say, something that you just said about communication reminded me, and people asking, why don't you sing in English? One of the great things about what you've done in terms of using Ladino, but sort of in a Castilian way, is that so many people in the world do speak Spanish, that it's not a foreign language to a vast population. It's just a different dialect of a language that they speak. And so you really can communicate with a lot of people. And of course, for those of us for whom Spanish is a second language, it's not really that different. It's not really that much harder to figure out what's going on in Ladino than it is to figure out what's going on in a Mexican Spanish song or Venezuelan Spanish song, So it's just another challenge, but it's also a form of communication that is very healthy, I think, for people to be hearing things in other languages besides English. So we thank you for that as well.
Thank you.
So Nani Noam Fasana, I guess the only thing left is to thank you so much for doing this interview with us and for your concert, which we really look forward to. So thank you so very much.
Thank you so much for interviewing and for inviting me to do this in person. I'm very, very honored and happy to be a part of the Homegrown series at the Library of Congress.